It had been a quiet afternoon, much like any other. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, the hum of the fridge and the soft clinking of my knife against the cutting board filling the space. The house was peaceful, almost too peaceful. My husband had been away on business for the past few days, leaving me with my stepson, Jake, who had recently moved in with us after some changes in his life. Jake was 17, and while we got along well enough, there was always this underlying distance between us. He was polite, distant, keeping to himself most of the time. He didn't seem to mind the quiet life we led here, but I often found myself wondering what was going on in his mind. I couldn't help but feel like there was something he wasn't telling me, something hidden beneath the surface. That afternoon, I was still trying to adjust to having him around all the time. His presence was a constant reminder of how little I actually knew about him, how much of his world remained closed off from mine. I didn't push, though. He needed his space. I tried to make sure he felt comfortable in his new home, even if I didn't fully understand him. I finished up in the kitchen and decided to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light across the backyard, and the gentle breeze made the trees sway ever so slightly. As I walked down the steps onto the porch, I noticed Jake sitting at the edge of the yard, staring off into the distance. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should give him some space or try to start a conversation. He was always so quiet, and I didn't want to intrude. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a tug of concern. I walked over to him, my footsteps soft on the grass, and stopped a few feet away. "Hey, Jake," I said gently, not wanting to startle him. "Everything okay?" He turned to look at me, his face a little distant, but not unfriendly. "Yeah, just thinking." I smiled softly, trying to ease the tension that hung in the air. "About what?" He shrugged, glancing back at the sky. "Just stuff. You know, life." I could tell that there was more on his mind than he was willing to say, but I didn't push. Instead, I sat down beside him on the grass, close but not too close. We sat in silence for a few moments, the sounds of the evening filling the space around us. I glanced at him, studying his profile, wondering what was going on behind those eyes that always seemed to look past me, rather than at me. I wasn't sure how much time passed, but then, without warning, Jake shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing against mine. It was a small movement, almost unnoticeable, but it caught my attention. For a moment, I didn't move, unsure of whether I should acknowledge it or keep pretending like everything was normal. I could feel the warmth of his body next to mine, and the strange intimacy of the moment made my heart skip a beat. The air between us felt charged, heavier than it had been before. It was a brief touch, nothing overt, nothing intentional, but for some reason, it felt significant, like the quiet, invisible tension that had been building up between us was finally coming to the surface. "Is it hard?" he asked suddenly, his voice low, almost too quiet to hear. I turned to him, surprised by the question. "Hard?" I echoed, unsure what he meant. "Living here," he said, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "With me, I mean." The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard, and I didn't know how to respond at first. I thought about it for a moment before I finally spoke. "It's not hard," I said softly. "It's just different. I'm still getting used to having you here." Jake looked down at the ground, his fingers brushing the grass absent-mindedly. "I guess I'm still getting used to it too," he said quietly. There was a pause, and I could sense that he was struggling with something, trying to work through emotions he didn't know how to express. The weight of the silence between us felt heavier now, and I realized that we were both caught in the same uncertainty, neither one of us knowing exactly how to navigate this strange new dynamic between us. For a moment, I wondered if I should say something more, offer some words of comfort or wisdom. But before I could find the right thing to say, Jake stood up suddenly, brushing off his pants as he did. "I'm going inside," he said quickly, almost like he was retreating from something. I watched him walk back toward the house, his movement stiff, his back turned toward me. The moment had passed, and I felt the quiet weight of the conversation linger in the air, unresolved. What had just happened? Why did I feel this sudden, unexpected shift in the space between us? I stayed on the grass for a while longer, staring at the empty space he had just vacated. Something had changed, something subtle, but it had changed nonetheless. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I knew that this moment, this unexpected moment with Jake, was only the beginning of something neither of us saw coming. The following days felt strangely heavy. Jake and I went about our usual routines, quiet breakfasts, the occasional exchange of words, and those long silences that lingered between us. But there was something unspoken now, something that weighed on me and made everything feel a little different. I kept replaying that brief moment on the lawn in my mind, wondering if it had meant something or if I was reading too much into it. Jake had started to act more distant after that day. He would avoid eye contact, his responses to me were brief, and he kept his distance more than usual. I wanted to talk to him, to ask him what was going on, but I hesitated, unsure of what I might uncover or if it was something I even wanted to know. Then, one evening, it happened again. It wasn't planned, and it certainly wasn't something I expected. It was after dinner, and we were sitting together in the living room, the low hum of the television the only sound filling the space. I was folding some laundry while Jake was sitting across from me on the couch, his feet propped up on the coffee table. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, but neither of us dared to break the silence. Without warning, Jake stood up and walked over to where I was sitting. He stood there for a second, and I looked up, surprised by his sudden movement. I need to talk to you," he said, his voice quiet but serious. My heart skipped a beat, and I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was headed. "Of course, Jake. What's on your mind?" He sat down beside me on the couch, a little closer than I was used to, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. His presence seemed to fill the room in a way it never had before. There was a weight in his eyes now, something darker than I had ever seen there. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," he began, his voice hesitant, but firm. "About us. About this dynamic. I don't know how to explain it, but it's been messing with my head." My pulse quickened, and I could feel my anxiety rising as I tried to make sense of his words. "What do you mean by this dynamic?" Jake looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for the right way to say it. His eyes were so intense that I couldn't look away, and I could feel the space between us closing. "I don't know why, but I've been feeling things I shouldn't feel. I can't explain it, but it's like, when I'm around you, everything just feels different. You're not like anyone else in my life." His words hung in the air, and I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't the conversation I had been expecting, and I wasn't prepared for where it was going. I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, I felt a knot form in my stomach as the reality of his confession settled over me. "I've tried to ignore it," he continued, his voice strained, as if the words were weighing heavily on him. "But I can't. I just need to tell you. I think I've started to see you differently. Not just as my stepmom. As something more." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, my head spinning with the weight of what he had just said. The air between us felt charged, thick with tension. My hands trembled slightly in my lap, and I struggled to process the sudden shift in the atmosphere. "No," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "Jake, this isn't right. You can't. This isn't how things are supposed to be." His eyes were filled with desperation, as if he was searching for some kind of understanding. "I know it's not right," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know, but it's how I feel. And I can't ignore it anymore. I need to say it." The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing in, suffocating. My mind raced, trying to make sense of this. Of what he was saying, of what this meant. I felt trapped in a whirlwind of emotions, the confusion overwhelming. "Jake," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please, this is not something we can talk about. It's wrong. It crosses a line that can't be uncrossed. We need to move past this. This is not the kind of relationship we have." He looked down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but I couldn't allow myself to bend. I couldn't let this go any further. I couldn't risk everything I had, everything we had built, on something that felt so wrong. He stood up, his face pale, his expression torn. "I didn't mean to mess everything up," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I just needed to say it." I didn't answer. I just watched as he slowly walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating. I sat there, motionless, unsure of how to move forward, unsure of what any of this meant for the future. The house felt emptier now. The quiet had become unbearable, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same. This moment, this unexpected confession, had changed everything between us, and I couldn't undo it. The line had been crossed, and now there was no going back. I was left with a quiet, painful ache in my chest, uncertain of how to navigate the space between us. The future seemed like a distant blur, and the only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever feel the same again.